I knew my family had stolen my inheritance the moment my mother's lawyer slid the amended will across the polished conference table. They smiled while I stared at a signature that didn't feel like my mother's. They told me to stop embarrassing the family and accept her final wishes. I almost did until 6 months later, when an independent financial audit uncovered a trail of altered documents that no one thought would ever be questioned. In that instant, the people who had called me greedy suddenly became desperate to keep me silent. If this story touches your heart, I'd truly appreciate it if you took a moment to like this video. And if you've ever experienced betrayal from someone you trusted, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. I always enjoy seeing how far these stories travel. If heartfelt family stories about truth, justice, and second chances speak to you, I'd be honored if you subscribed and joined me for the rest of this journey. My name is Anthony Brooks, and I was 68 years old when I learned that grief does not always bring a family closer. Sometimes, grief simply removes the curtain. I had lived in Columbus, Ohio, most of my life. Not the glamorous part people see in travel magazines, but the quiet neighborhoods where porches still had rocking chairs, neighbors still waved from driveways, and every grocery store cashier seemed to know whose husband had passed, whose daughter had married, and whose knees were acting up again. After my husband Robert died from heart failure 7 years earlier, my world became very small. I had my little ranch house, my church group, my garden, and my mother, Eleanor Brooks. Mother was 91 when she passed, but even in her last year, she had a way of making people stand straighter when she entered a room. She had been a registered nurse for almost 40 years, most of that time at Riverside Methodist Hospital. She believed in clean sheets, handwritten thank you notes, and never leaving a person alone when they were scared. "You don't need much in this life, Anthony," she used to tell me. "Just a clear conscience, a locked front door, and somebody who'll tell you the truth." For the last 5 years of her life, I was that somebody. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I drove 22 minutes from my house to hers. I picked up her prescriptions, cooked low-sodium meals she pretended to enjoy, balanced her checkbook, cleaned the bathroom, changed the sheets, and sat with her while she watched old courtroom shows and criticized everyone's manners. My younger brother, Michael Brooks, lived only 40 minutes away in Dayton, but somehow that distance became an ocean whenever Mother needed help. Michael was charming when he wanted to be. He had our father's smile and our mother's sharp eyes, and he knew exactly how to use both. He ran a small construction supply business that always seemed to be almost turning the corner. Every Christmas he arrived with expensive-looking gifts and stories about big contracts coming soon. Every January, Mother quietly covered something for him, a late mortgage payment, a business tax issue, a loan he swore was temporary. I never judged him out loud. Maybe I should have. His daughter, Emily Carter, was different. She was 38, polished, educated, and always smelled faintly of expensive perfume. She worked in marketing for a real estate firm and spoke in that smooth, careful way people use when they are trying to sound kind while measuring what they can get from you. In the last year of Mother's life, Emily suddenly became very attentive. She brought flowers. She posted old photos of herself with Mother on Facebook. She called her my best friend in captions, though I could count on one hand the number of times Emily had visited before Mother's health declined. At first, I told myself not to be bitter. Maybe watching your grandmother grow frail changes something in a person. Maybe Emily had finally understood that time was running out. But there were little moments. Once I came into Mother's kitchen and found Emily sitting beside her with a folder open on the table. "What's all this?" I asked. Emily closed the folder too quickly. "Oh, just helping Grandma organize some things," she said, smiling. Mother looked tired that day, her thin hands folded in her lap. "What things?" I asked. "Insurance," Emily said. "Old accounts. You know how paperwork piles up." I looked at Mother. "You want me to help with it?" Mother opened her mouth, but Emily touched her arm. "We've got it handled, Aunt Anthony." Aunt Anthony. She only called me that when she wanted distance. Later that afternoon, when Emily left, I asked Mother about the folder. She waved me off. That girl fusses too much. Was it about your will? Mother looked at me, then really looked at me. My will is settled, she said. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. I never forgot that sentence. When Mother died in early October, the maple tree in her front yard had already turned red. It was the kind of red that looked almost too beautiful for mourning. I remember standing beneath it after the funeral, watching leaves fall onto the walkway my father had poured with his own hands in 1968. People came through the house with casseroles and condolences. Women from Mother's church brought lemon cake and ham biscuits. Her neighbor, Mrs. Whitaker, held my hands and cried harder than some relatives. Michael stood near the fireplace, accepting sympathy like a man running for office. Emily moved through the rooms with a wine glass in her hand, telling people where to place flowers, where to stack cards, and which family photos should be displayed. At one point, I found her in Mother's bedroom opening drawers. "What are you doing?" I asked. She didn't even look guilty. "Looking for the pearl earrings," she said. "Grandma said I could have them. She just got buried this morning." Emily shut the drawer slowly. "I know that." Something cold moved through me. I wanted to tell her to leave the room. I wanted to say those earrings had been my father's anniversary gift to Mother. I wanted to say that grief should have a sacred pause before people started dividing the dead. But I was tired. So tired that my bones felt hollow. "Not today," I said. Emily looked at me for a long moment, then smiled. "Of course, not today." 3 days after the funeral, I received a call from Richard Lawson, Mother's attorney. I knew his name, though I had only met him twice. He had handled Mother's estate planning years earlier after my father passed. His voice was smooth and formal. "Mrs. Brooks, I'm calling to inform you that we've scheduled the reading of your mother's will for next Friday at 10 in the morning. "Next Friday?" I asked. "Yes. Your brother and niece have confirmed." That gave me pause. They already knew. There was a slight silence. They were notified earlier this morning. Earlier that morning, before me. I looked down at the kitchen table, where Mother's old recipe box sat beside my coffee mug. I had taken it home after the funeral because I couldn't bear the thought of it being thrown away. "I'll be there," I said. The morning of the reading, I dressed carefully. Not fancy, but proper. A navy dress, low heels, my silver cross necklace, and Mother's small gold bracelet around my wrist. I told myself it was not about money. It truly wasn't. Mother had never been rich in the flashy sense, but she had been careful. She owned her home outright. She had retirement accounts, investments, savings, bonds, and life insurance from my father. More than that, she had memories wrapped inside every room of that house. The house mattered to me because I had cared for it, and because Mother had told me many times what she wanted. "This place should stay with you," she once said while I was pruning her roses. Michael would sell it before the ink dried. Emily would turn it into a stage listing with gray walls and fake lemons in a bowl. I had laughed then. Mother had not. Richard Lawson's office was downtown on the 6th floor of a glass building that made everything inside feel too clean and too cold. The receptionist asked me to wait in a room with leather chairs and a long conference table. Michael was already there. He wore a dark suit, his hair freshly trimmed, his wedding ring shining, though he and his wife had been separated for months. Emily sat beside him in a cream-colored blazer, scrolling on her phone. She looked up when I entered and gave me the kind of smile people give when they already know the ending. "Anthony," Michael said, standing halfway. Not Sis, not Tony, the childhood nickname he used when he wanted something. Just Anthony. "Michael," I said. Emily tucked her phone into her purse. You look nice. Thank you. No one asked how I was sleeping. No one mentioned Mother's favorite hymn from the service. No one said it felt strange to be there without her. I sat across from them. The room was quiet except for the hum of the air conditioner. Michael tapped his fingers once against the table. Emily checked the door twice. That was when I first felt it clearly, not sadness, not anxiety, but warning. They were not nervous about what we were about to hear. They were waiting for me to hear it. Richard Lawson entered with a folder under one arm and reading glasses in his hand. He was in his late 60s, tall and narrow with white hair and a practiced expression of sympathy. Thank you all for coming, he said. There were only 3 of us at that table, 3 living branches from Mother's family tree. Yet somehow, I had never felt more alone. Richard opened the folder. Paper whispered against paper. Before he began, he looked at me briefly, then away. That small movement struck me harder than it should have. I folded my hands in my lap to keep them from shaking. For one final second, I still believed my mother's wishes would protect me. I believed love, loyalty, and years of care had left a mark strong enough to survive a legal document. Then, Richard Lawson cleared his throat and began to read. Richard Lawson began with the usual formal words, the kind that make death sound organized. I, Eleanor Brooks, being of sound mind and disposing memory. The phrase struck me strangely. Sound mind, disposing memory. My mother had always had a strong mind, even when her body betrayed her. But in the last months, there had been days when the pain medicine made her drift in and out. Days when she asked whether my father had come home from work, though he had been buried for 18 years. I looked at Michael. He sat still, hands folded, eyes fixed on Richard's papers. Emily looked down at the table, but not like someone grieving. She looked like someone waiting for a check to clear. Richard continued reading. Mother's funeral expenses had already been arranged. A few charitable donations were to be made to her church and to a nursing scholarship fund. That part sounded exactly like her. She had always believed nurses deserved more respect than they got. Then Richard turned a page. To my daughter, Anthony Brooks, I leave my mother's recipe box, my wedding Bible, and the framed photograph of our family taken at Thanksgiving in 1989. For a moment, I thought I had misheard him. I blinked. The room did not move, but something inside me tilted. Recipe box, Bible, photograph. Those were precious things, yes, but Mother had said so much more. She had told me more than once that the house would stay with me, not because I wanted money, not because I demanded it, but because I had been the one who kept that house alive after Daddy died. I knew which window stuck in March. I knew where the basement wall leaked during hard rain. I knew the rose bush by the fence needed cutting back before winter, or it would split under snow. Richard did not pause long enough for me to breathe. To my son, Michael Brooks, I leave my residence located on Ashbury Lane in Columbus, Ohio, including all furnishings, personal property, and contents not otherwise specifically distributed. My mouth went dry. Michael lowered his head slightly, but I saw the corner of his mouth tighten. Not grief, not surprise, recognition. He knew. Richard kept reading. To my granddaughter, Emily Carter. I leave the remaining balance of my investment accounts, including but not limited to brokerage holdings, certificates of deposit, and any liquid assets held under my individual name at the time of my passing. Emily pressed her lips together. Her hand moved under the table. I realized Michael had reached for it. The air conditioner hummed louder. I stared at Richard. I'm sorry, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Could you repeat that? Richard adjusted his glasses. Mrs. Brooks, my mother left her house to Michael. Yes, and the investment accounts to Emily. That is what the amended document states. The word amended landed like a stone. Amended, I asked. Richard looked uncomfortable for the first time. Yes, Your mother executed an amendment to her estate plan approximately 7 months before her death. 7 months. I tried to calculate quickly. 7 months before her death would have been March. March was when Mother had fallen in the bathroom. March was when she was admitted to Riverside with pneumonia and dehydration. March was when I slept in a chair beside her bed 3 nights in a row because she kept pulling at her IV. I remembered her whispering, "Don't let them rush me, Anthony." At the time, I thought she meant the doctors. "What date in March?" I asked. Richard glanced down. March 14th. The blood seemed to leave my hands. On March 14th, Mother had been in the hospital. Not just resting, not casually recovering. She had been in a private room with oxygen under her nose so weak she could barely sign the meal request form the nurse placed before her. "That can't be right," I said. Michael sighed long and disappointed, like I was already embarrassing him. "Anthony, please," I turned toward him. She was in the hospital on March 14th. She had good days, he said. Not that day. Emily finally looked at me. Her expression was soft, but her eyes were sharp. Grandma knew what she wanted. Maybe it's just hard for you to accept that it wasn't what you expected. I felt heat rise behind my eyes. What I expected, I said. I took care of her for 5 years. No one is denying that, Emily said. But she said it as though she was denying every bit of it. Richard placed one hand on the folder. I understand this may be upsetting. Estate matters often bring out strong emotions. This isn't emotion, I said. This is wrong. Michael leaned back in his chair. There it is. I looked at him. There what is? The accusation. His voice was calm, but his face had hardened. Mother made her choice, and now you're suggesting something improper because you didn't get what you wanted. I almost laughed from the shock of it. What I wanted? I repeated. Michael, you came to her house twice in 3 months, unless you needed money. His cheeks flushed. Emily cut in. This is not the time. No, I said, turning to her. Apparently the time was March 14th, when your grandmother could barely hold a spoon. Richard cleared his throat sharply. I must advise everyone to remain civil. May I see the document, I asked. Richard hesitated. That hesitation told me more than any answer. As a beneficiary, you are entitled to a copy, he said carefully. I can provide one. I'd like to see it now. Michael shifted. Emily's jaw tightened. Richard removed several pages from the folder and slid them toward me. My hands trembled as I pulled the papers close. The first pages looked official, full of legal language and clean formatting. I scanned quickly, barely understanding the paragraphs. Then I found the signature page. Eleanor M. Brooks. At first glance, it resembled Mother's signature. The wide E, the long loop in the B, the slight upward slant. But I had seen my mother write her name thousands of times. On birthday cards, on checks, on grocery lists, on notes she left me beside the coffee pot. This signature was too smooth, too careful. Mother's real signature had grown shaky after her arthritis worsened. The line usually broke slightly between Eleanor and Brooks because her fingers cramped. This one flowed without interruption. It doesn't look right, I said. Michael gave a small laugh. You're a handwriting expert now? No, I said. I'm her daughter. Emily folded her arms. A grieving daughter. I stared at her. What does that mean? It means you're not thinking clearly. The cruelty of it was quiet, almost elegant. I looked back at the paper. At the bottom, beneath Mother's signature, were witness lines and a notary seal. One witness name was unfamiliar. The other made me pause. Linda Foster. I had heard that name before. Richard's office assistant, the woman who called to confirm appointments, the woman who had once told me, "Your mother is such a sweet lady," when I brought Mother in years ago to update her medical power of attorney. "Was Linda Foster present when my mother signed this?" I asked. Richard's expression closed. "According to the document, yes. At the hospital, the execution location is listed as your mother's residence." I sat very still. "That's impossible," I said. Richard said nothing. Michael rubbed his forehead. "Anthony, enough." "No," I said. "She was not at her residence on March 14th. She was in room 412 at Riverside Methodist Hospital." Emily looked at Richard. "Do we have to keep doing this?" I heard the fear beneath her annoyance. It was small, but it was there. Richard gathered the pages gently, though I still had one hand resting on them. "You'll receive copies," he said. "For now, I think it may be best for everyone to take some time." "Time," I said. "You just read a document that says, 'My mother changed everything while she was hospitalized, but the paper says she signed it at home.' That may be a clerical error on a will amendment on the execution location," he said. It sounded rehearsed. Michael stood. Mother trusted Richard. She trusted the process. You should too. I looked up at my brother, this man who had once cried when I left for nursing school because he didn't want me to move away. This man I had protected from Daddy's anger, loaned money to defend it when Mother was disappointed. And all I saw now was a stranger wearing my brother's face. Emily stood beside him and picked up her purse. Before they left, she leaned toward me just enough that Richard could pretend not to hear. "Don't make this uglier than it needs to be," she whispered. I looked at the signature one last time before Richard took the page back. My mother's name sat there in black ink, calm and obedient, as if she had willingly erased me from everything we had built together. But deep in my chest, beneath the hurt, beneath the humiliation, something small and stubborn began to wake. My mother had taught me to recognize the truth, and that signature was not it. I left Richard Lawson's office with a copy of the amended will pressed against my chest, like evidence from a crime scene. Outside downtown, Columbus moved on as if nothing had happened. Buses sighed at the curb. Office workers hurried past with coffee cups and lunch bags. Somewhere, a woman laughed into her phone. Life continued with cruel normalcy, while mine had just split open in a conference room. I sat in my car for nearly 20 minutes before I could drive. The papers lay on this passenger seat. I kept looking at them, as if the words might rearrange themselves if I stared long enough. But they did not. My mother's house still belonged to Michael. Her investments still belonged to Emily. I still had a recipe box, a Bible, and one framed photograph. By the time I got home, my hands were numb. I placed the papers on my kitchen table and made tea I never drank. Then I pulled out the small calendar I had kept during Mother's illness. I was old-fashioned that way. I still wrote appointments down by hand. Doctor visits, medication changes, hospital stays, pharmacy pickups, all of it. March 14th. There it was. Riverside Methodist Hospital. Room 412. Pneumonia. Oxygen. Dr. Patel rounds at 9:30. Michael visited 4:15 p.m. Emily came after 5. I stared at those last two notes until my vision blurred. Michael visited. Emily came. I had not remembered that at the lawyer's office because shock has a way of locking certain doors in your mind. But now the door opened. That day, I had gone home for 2 hours to shower and change clothes. Mother had insisted. "You smell like hospital coffee," she whispered, trying to smile. "Go home before I start charging you rent for that chair." When I returned, Michael was in the hallway speaking quietly on his phone. Emily was inside Mother's room, tucking something into her purse. At the time, I assumed it was lotion or a phone charger. Now, I wasn't sure. The next morning, Michael called. I knew it was him before I saw the name because the phone seemed to ring with accusation. "Anthony," he said when I answered. "We need to talk." "That's interesting," I said. "Yesterday you seemed done talking." He exhaled sharply. "I don't want this to become a war." Then why did it feel like one had already been planned? Silence. Then his voice softened the way it used to when he wanted Mother to write a check. "I know you're hurt. Do you?" "Yes. But you have to understand, Mom worried about you." I nearly dropped the phone. Worried about me. She thought the house would be too much for you. The repairs, the taxes, the upkeep. She didn't want you burdened. That is not what she told me. Maybe she didn't want to hurt your feelings. I looked around my kitchen at the faded curtains I had sewn myself at the stack of medical bills from Robert's final year that I had paid one by one. I had buried a husband, managed my own home, cared for an elderly mother. And now, my brother was telling me I was too fragile for a house. "Michael," I said slowly. "Mother was in the hospital on March 14th. She was alert. She was on oxygen. People sign documents in hospitals all the time. The document says she signed it at home." Another pause. That was probably just a clerical mistake. Richard had used the same phrase. The hairs on my arms rose. "Did Richard tell you to say that?" "What clerical mistake?" "That's exactly what he said." His tone hardened. "Don't start twisting things. I'm not twisting anything. I'm reading what's in front of me." He lowered his voice. "Listen to me carefully. You don't want to challenge this. Why not? Because you'll lose, and you'll spend money you don't have trying to prove something that isn't true." There it was. Not comfort, not concern, a warning. "I haven't decided what I'm going to do," I said. "You need to sign the acknowledgement Richard is sending over. It says you received your copy and agree not to contest distribution." I laughed once. It came out dry and bitter. "You expect me to sign that? It's standard." "No, it's convenient." "Anthony, don't make me say this." "Say what?" His voice dropped another inch. "You've always been emotional. Mom knew that. If you drag this out, people are going to see it for what it is. And what is that?" "Jealousy." For a moment, I could not speak. Jealousy. I remembered bathing Mother after her surgery because she was too embarrassed for the aide to do it. I remembered sleeping in a recliner during ice storms because I was afraid her power would go out. I remembered clipping her toenails, sorting her pills, washing her nightgowns, and holding her hand when she cried for my father. And my brother called it jealousy. "I have to go," I said. "Anthony." "No. I have to go before I say something I will not regret." I hung up. Later that afternoon, an email arrived from Richard Lawson's office. Attached was a document titled Acknowledgement and Waiver of Contest. I opened it and read every line. It stated that I accepted the amended will as valid. It stated that I waived any right to challenge the estate plan. It stated that I agreed not to interfere with the transfer of property. At the bottom, there was a blank line for my signature. My name typed beneath it, Anthony Brooks. Seeing my name waiting there already prepared made my stomach turn. 10 minutes later, Emily texted me. "Aunt Anthony. Dad said Richard sent you the form. Please sign it so we can all move forward. Grandma wouldn't want fighting." I stared at the words. Grandma wouldn't want fighting. No mother would not have wanted fighting, but she also would not have wanted lies dressed up as peace. I typed back, "I need time." Emily responded almost immediately. "Time for what? Everything is clear." I did not answer. That evening, I took out Mother's wedding Bible from the box I had brought home. It smelled faintly of dust and lavender drawer sachets. Inside the front cover, Mother had written her name in blue ink. Eleanor May Brooks. The letters trembled slightly because she had written it in her later years. The E was wide. The B in Brooks looped unevenly. There was a tiny break between her first and last name. I placed the Bible beside the signature page from the amendment. 2 names. Same woman. Different truth. I traced the air above them without touching the ink. The signature on the will was too neat, too young, too controlled. I whispered, "What happened, Mama?" The house was quiet. The next day, I called Riverside Methodist Hospital and asked about getting Mother's records for March 14th. The woman in medical records explained that because Mother had passed, I would need proof of authority or proper authorization. The irony nearly made me sick. The very document that might have been forged was now standing between me and the records that could prove it. So I called Richard. His assistant answered. "Law Office of Richard Lawson, this is Linda." Linda Foster. My fingers tightened around the phone. "This is Anthony Brooks. I need to speak with Mr. Lawson. 1 moment, please." Her voice was pleasant, too pleasant. I wondered if she remembered March 14th. I wondered if she had watched my mother's hand shake. I wondered if she had watched anything at all. Richard came on the line. "Mrs. Brooks, I need documentation showing where my mother signed the amendment. As I explained, you have a copy of the executed document." "That document says she signed at home. My calendar says she was hospitalized. A calendar is not legal evidence." "No, but hospital records are." He paused. "What exactly are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting I need answers before I sign anything." His voice cooled. "You are under no obligation to sign immediately. However, refusing to cooperate may delay the estate and increase expenses. Expenses for whom? For everyone. Meaning me. Meaning pressure. Meaning behave." I hung up without promising anything. That night, I dreamed of Mother sitting at her kitchen table, trying to write her name while someone stood behind her. In the dream, I could not see the person's face. I could only see Mother looking toward the doorway, searching for me. I woke before dawn with tears on my cheeks. By sunrise, my decision had settled inside me. I would not sign, not because I wanted a fight, not because I wanted revenge, not because I wanted money more than family. I would not sign because the date was wrong. The place was wrong. The signature was wrong. And every person who should have wanted the truth was trying too hard to bury it. Michael could call me jealous. Emily could call me emotional. Richard could call it a clerical mistake. But my mother had taught me better. A lie does not become peace just because a family asks you to swallow it. The next morning, I drove back to my mother's house with a paper grocery bag on the passenger seat and a knot in my stomach. I told myself I was only going there to collect a few personal things before Michael and Emily started dividing everything like merchandise. But deep down, I knew that was not the whole truth. I was going because of something Mother had said to me months earlier, back when she was still strong enough to sit at the kitchen table with a cup of tea between both hands. "My papers are not all where people think they are," she had told me. At the time, I thought she meant she had misplaced an insurance policy or an old bank statement. Mother had always been organized, but in her last year, she sometimes tucked things into strange places. Appointment cards inside cookbooks, grocery receipts, under couch cushions, birthday cards in the freezer once, which made both of us laugh until she started coughing. But now, after Richard Lawson's cold office and that impossible signature, her words sounded different. "My papers are not all where people think they are." The house on Ashbury Lane looked smaller than it had when I was a child. The white paint was peeling near the gutters. The porch light still had a dead moth trapped inside the glass. The rose bushes by the fence had gone wild since Mother's death, their branches scratching against each other in the wind like old bones. I sat in the driveway for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. Every window held a memory. There was the living room window where Mother used to stand when Daddy came home from work. There was the upstairs window of the bedroom I had shared with my cousin one summer when her parents divorced. There was the kitchen window where Mother watched cardinals at the feeder and said red birds were little reminders from heaven. I unlocked the front door with my key. The smell hit me first. Lavender, old wood, furniture polish. And underneath it, that hollow smell a house gets when the person who loved it is gone. "Hi, Mama," I whispered before I could stop myself. My voice disappeared into the rooms. I started in the kitchen because that had always been the heart of the house. The recipe box was already with me, but Mother kept more than recipes in her kitchen. She kept notes, stamps, rubber bands, church envelopes, and little scraps of information she thought might matter someday. I opened the junk drawer beside the stove. Inside were pens that no longer worked a tape measure, batteries, twist ties, old coupons, and 3 tiny screwdrivers Daddy used for his eyeglasses. Nothing. I checked the cabinet above the refrigerator. Casserole dishes, a thermos, a tin of Christmas cookie cutters. Nothing. I moved slowly, afraid of disturbing the house and afraid of finding nothing at all. By noon, the grocery bag was half full of small pieces of my mother. Her reading glasses, a pair of soft blue gloves, a church bulletin with her handwriting in the margin, and the little ceramic cardinal that had sat on her windowsill for years. Then I went to her bedroom. That room hurt the most. The bed was made because I had made it the week before she died, tucking the quilt under the mattress the way she liked. Her robe still hung on the back of the door. A bottle of hand lotion sat on the nightstand. Her slippers were lined up neatly beside the bed, as if she might return any minute and slide her feet into them. I sat on the edge of the mattress and pressed my hand over my mouth. For a few minutes, I was not a suspicious daughter looking for evidence. I was just a grieving daughter sitting in the room where her mother would never sleep again. Then I remembered Emily opening drawers on the day of the funeral. My grief hardened. I opened the nightstand drawer. Inside were tissues, cough drops, a rosary, and an old notebook with a faded green cover. I had seen that notebook before. Mother used it for everything: phone numbers, reminders, Bible verses, measurements for curtains, names of nurses she liked. Names of nurses she did not like. I lifted it carefully and opened to the first page. Her handwriting filled the lines, slanted and uneven. Call Anthony about pharmacy. Ask Michael if he paid insurance. Emily likes silver necklace. Do not forget tax folder. I turned pages slowly. Some entries were ordinary. Some made me smile. Some made my chest ache. Then, near the back, I found a page folded in half. On it, Mother had written only one sentence. The original is safe where only honesty can reach. I read it once, then again. The room seemed to tighten around me. The original, I whispered. My hands began to shake so badly I had to set the notebook on my lap. The original what? The original will. The original estate plan. The original documents, Richard claimed, had been amended where only honesty can reach. It sounded like Mother, and not like her at the same time. She was practical, not dramatic. But she also loved little sayings, little moral riddles. When Michael lied as a boy, she used to say, "A crooked road always comes back to the front porch." When I wanted to quit nursing school after my first awful clinical rotation, she told me, "Hard things don't mean wrong things, where only honesty can reach." I turned the page hoping for more, but there was nothing except an old grocery list. Eggs, oatmeal, lemons, Anthony's tea. I pressed the notebook against my chest. For the first time since the will reading, I felt something other than shock and pain. I felt a thread. Thin, fragile, but real. I searched the rest of the room with new urgency. I checked her dresser drawers, lifting scarves and folded sweaters. I opened jewelry boxes. I looked behind framed pictures. I checked inside old purses in the closet. In a black handbag Mother had not carried in years, I found an envelope with my name on it. Anthony. My breath caught. I opened it carefully. Inside was not a letter. It was a small brass key taped to an index card. Beneath the key in Mother's handwriting were 4 words. Bank. Ask for Harold. I stared at the key until my eyes burned. Harold. Harold Whitman had been the manager at First Buckeye Bank for as long as I could remember. He had helped Mother after Daddy died, helped her move accounts, helped her understand retirement paperwork. He had retired years ago or so, I thought. But Mother still trusted old systems and old names. A bank key meant a safe deposit box. My pulse quickened. I looked toward the bedroom doorway, suddenly aware of every creak in the house. No one knew I was there except me. At least I thought no one did. I put the key in my purse, slid the notebook into the grocery bag, and continued searching, but more carefully now. In the closet behind a stack of shoeboxes, I found an old photo album from the 1980s. Inside were pictures of our family before everything became complicated. Michael, with missing front teeth. Me in nursing scrubs, young and exhausted. Mother and Daddy standing in front of the house with their arms around each other. Tucked behind one photo was a bank receipt dated 9 years earlier. Safe deposit box, annual renewal. First Buckeye Bank, box number 317. My hands went cold. This was not random. Mother had left a trail. Not a loud one, not an obvious one, but enough for someone who knew her to follow. I sat on the floor among shoeboxes and old photographs, and I began to cry, not the broken kind of crying from the day of the funeral, but something deeper. Something mixed with love and fear. Mother had known. Maybe not everything. Maybe not exactly what Michael and Emily would do. But she had known enough to hide something. She had known enough to write, "The original is safe." Before I could gather myself, a car door slammed outside. I froze. Through the bedroom window, I saw Emily's silver SUV in the driveway. She stepped out wearing dark sunglasses and carrying a cardboard box. A moment later, Michael got out of the passenger side. My heart began to pound. I quickly put the album receipt notebook and key into the grocery bag, then folded one of Mother's sweaters over the top to hide them. Footsteps sounded on the porch. The front door opened. "See?" Emily's voice floated up from downstairs. "Her car's here." Michael answered, "I told you she'd come snooping." Snooping. Not grieving. Not collecting memories. Snooping. I stood in my mother's bedroom, clutching the grocery bag with both hands, and realized something that made the air feel thin. They were not afraid I would mourn too loudly. They were afraid I would find something. I stood in my mother's bedroom with the grocery bag clutched against my ribs, listening to Michael and Emily move through the downstairs rooms like they owned every breath of air inside that house. "She's upstairs," Emily said. Michael answered, "Just stay calm. Stay calm." That was what people said when they were already planning to make you look unreasonable. I wiped my face, quickly tucked Mother's notebook deeper beneath the sweater, and stepped into the hallway before they could come up and find me hiding like a thief in the house where I had learned to walk. Emily reached the bottom of the stairs first. She looked up at me, her sunglasses pushed into her hair, her mouth curved in a smile that had no warmth in it. There you are, she said. Michael stood behind her, one hand in his pocket, the other gripping his phone. He looked around the foyer as if checking whether I had damaged something. I didn't realize I needed permission to be in my mother's house, I said. Emily's smile tightened. Legally, it's Dad's house now. The words hit harder than I expected. Not because I believed them, because she enjoyed saying them. Michael climbed 2 steps. Anthony, we don't want trouble. Then why did you come here looking for it? We came to start organizing things, he said. The realtor is coming next week to give an estimate. My throat closed. The realtor! Emily crossed her arms. It makes sense. The market is strong in this neighborhood. Older homes are moving fast if they're staged properly. Staged properly. My mother's life staged properly. I came down the stairs, slowly holding the bag close. Emily's eyes dropped to it at once. What's in there? She asked. Personal items. What kind of personal items? I looked at her. My mother's things. Michael sighed. We need to inventory everything before anything leaves the house. I almost laughed. You were ready to take her pearl earrings the day of the funeral? Emily's cheeks colored. Grandma promised me those. Mother promised a lot of things, I said. The foyer went quiet. Michael's face changed. The patient brother mask slipped for just a second, and beneath it, I saw irritation sharpen into something colder. Don't start, he said. I haven't started anything. You came here digging through drawers. I came here to collect memories. Emily stepped forward. If that's true, then you won't mind showing us the bag. I held it tighter. No. Her eyebrows lifted. No. Michael came down the steps again and stopped a few feet from me. Anthony, this is exactly the kind of behavior we're concerned about. We, the family. I looked from him to Emily. There are 3 of us, and 2 of you keep using the word family when you mean yourselves. Emily's voice turned soft. You're grieving. Nobody blames you for acting out. There it was again. That polished cruelty. Acting out. Like I was a child. Like I was unstable. Like the woman who had managed Mother's medications, doctor appointments, bills, insurance claims, and daily care was suddenly incapable of carrying a sweater out the door. Michael reached toward the grocery bag. I stepped back. Do not touch this. His hand froze in the air. For a moment, none of us moved. Then Emily said, Dad just let her take it. If she wants to steal old junk, let her. Old junk. Mother's notebook pressed against my side like a heartbeat. I moved past them toward the door. Michael did not stop me, but he followed so closely that I could feel his anger behind me. On the porch, Mrs. Whitaker from next door was watering her mums. She looked over her face, full of concern. Everything all right, Anthony? Before I could answer, Emily called from behind me, bright and false. Everything's fine, Mrs. Whitaker. Just sorting through Grandma's things. Grandma. The word sounded wrong in her mouth now. I put the grocery bag in my car and locked the door. When I turned around, Michael was standing on the walkway. You need to hand over your key, he said. I stared at him. Excuse me, the house belongs to me under the will, until distribution is final. Richard advised that access should be limited. Richard advised that, yes, or Emily did. His jaw tightened. Give me the key. No, Emily came onto the porch carrying a cardboard box. Aunt Anthony, don't make this dramatic. You're changing locks on our mother's house and I'm dramatic. Michael held out his hand. The key. I looked at that hand and suddenly saw him as a boy reaching for the last biscuit at dinner, reaching for Daddy's approval, reaching for Mother's wallet when life disappointed him. Always reaching, always taking, always explaining later. I removed the house key from my key ring. For one bitter second, I considered throwing it into the bushes. Instead, I placed it in his palm. His fingers closed around it quickly. Something inside me broke then, not loudly, not visibly, just a quiet snap. I had been the daughter who came when mother called. I knew the alarm code, the medication schedule, the plumber's number, the neighbor's spare key, the way the furnace rattled before it failed. Yet with one false document and one greedy hand, I was standing outside like a stranger. Emily carried her cardboard box to her SUV. I saw the silver-framed photo from Mother's mantel inside it. "That picture stays," I said. Emily looked down. "Dad said I could take a few things. That was Daddy and Mother's 40th anniversary photo." She shrugged. "They'll scan it for you." "No, put it back." Michael rubbed his temples. "For God's sake, Anthony." Mrs. Whitaker had stopped watering now. Across the street, Mr. Alvarez stood near his mailbox pretending not to watch. "Good," I thought. "Let them see." Emily slowly removed the frame and carried it back inside, but the look she gave me promised this was not over. I got into my car before my legs failed me. As I drove away, I looked in the rear-view mirror and saw Michael watching me from the porch, my key still in his hand. The next 2 days were a blur of humiliation. Emily began posting online about preparing Grandma's beloved home for its next chapter. She included soft-filtered photos of Mother's living room, her china cabinet, her porch swing. People commented with hearts and sympathy. One woman wrote, "Your grandmother would be so proud of how you're honoring her." Honoring her? By selling her furniture before the ground had settled over her grave. On Thursday morning, Mrs. Whitaker called me. "Anthony," she said carefully, "there's a truck outside your mother's house." My stomach dropped. What kind of truck? Furniture consignment? I was in my car within 5 minutes. When I arrived, 2 men were carrying Mother's dining chairs down the porch steps. The same chairs where our family had eaten Thanksgiving dinner for 40 years. The same chairs Mother had reupholstered herself after Daddy retired. Emily stood in the doorway with a clipboard. "What are you doing?" I shouted. She barely looked up. "Selling what we don't need. You don't need." "That table belonged to our family." Michael appeared behind her. "It's just furniture." I walked past them into the dining room. The room was half empty. The china cabinet doors stood open. Mother's lace table runner was crumpled in a cardboard box. A pile of old framed school photos, church certificates, and family portraits had been dumped near the hallway. Then I saw it. A black trash bag near the back door split open slightly. Inside were Mother's handwritten letters, old birthday cards, and the paper angel I had made in 2nd grade. Its glitter wings were bent. I knelt and pulled it out with shaking hands. "You were throwing this away?" I asked. Emily looked annoyed. It was in a box of clutter. Clutter. My childhood was clutter. Mother's letters were clutter. The proof of our life before greed was clutter. I stood slowly. "You're not cleaning," I said. "You're erasing." Michael's expression darkened. "You need to leave." "No, this is my house. No, Michael. It is Mother's house, and until a court says otherwise, you don't get to destroy everything in it." Emily stepped close enough that I could smell her perfume. "You really should be careful," she said quietly. "People are already worried about how you're handling this." I looked at her. "What people?" She smiled. "People." That was when I understood the next part of their plan. First, take the house. Then take the story. Make me look unstable, emotional, greedy, difficult. Make every question I asked sound like proof that I was unraveling. I picked up the split trash bag and carried it to my car. Michael followed me onto the porch. "If you come back here again without permission, "I'll call the police." I turned to him. "Call them!" His face twitched. I wanted him to do it. I wanted officers standing there while I explained how the daughter who cared for Eleanor Brooks was being threatened for rescuing family letters from the trash. But he didn't call. Men like Michael preferred pressure in private. I drove home with the trash bag in my back seat and Mother's hidden notebook locked in my glove compartment. My hands shook the whole way. That night, I spread the rescued letters across my kitchen table. Some were from Daddy to Mother during their early marriage. Some were birthday cards from me. Some were old notes Mother had written to herself. And beneath them, stuck to the inside of the torn bag, I found one more thing. A small, yellow sticky note. Not old, recent. In Emily's handwriting, it said, "Check upstairs closet again. Make sure no bank papers left." I sat down slowly. The house was no longer just a place full of memories. It was a place they were searching. And whatever Mother had hidden, they were terrified I would find it first. For 3 days, I kept the brass key hidden in a coffee can in my pantry. It was not a clever hiding place, maybe, but it was the kind of place Mother would have approved of. She believed expensive safes only told thieves where to look. Ordinary places, she used to say, protected extraordinary things. Every morning I took the key out, looked at it, then put it back. "Bank! Ask for Harold!" The words on Mother's index card followed me through the house. They sat with me while I washed dishes. They whispered while I folded laundry. They kept me awake at night while I listened to the furnace click on and off in the dark. I wanted to run straight to First Buckeye Bank and demand box 317. But grief had made me impulsive before, and every instinct told me this was not something to do carelessly. Michael and Emily were watching the house. Richard Lawson was pushing paperwork. Linda Foster had answered the phone too smoothly. I needed to move quietly, so I called the bank first. The young woman who answered sounded polite and young enough to have never balanced a checkbook by hand. "First Buckeye Bank. How may I direct your call? I'm trying to reach Harold Whitman," I said. There was a pause. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Mr. Whitman retired several years ago." "I understand. Is there anyone there who worked with him? May I ask what this is regarding?" I looked at Mother's card on the table. A safe deposit box belonging to Eleanor Brooks. Another pause. This one was different. "One moment, please." Soft music began to play, thin and cheerful. I stared at the refrigerator where Mother's recipe for lemon pound cake was held under a magnet shaped like a cardinal. After almost 2 minutes, a man came on the line. "This is Daniel Harper." The name stopped me. "Daniel Harper," I repeated. "Yes, ma'am. Did you know my mother?" He did not ask who my mother was. Instead, his voice softened. "Mrs. Brooks." My heart gave a sharp little twist. Yes, Eleanor Brooks was my mother. There was a long silence, then a quiet sigh. "I'm very sorry for your loss, Mrs. Brooks. Your mother was one of the finest women I ever worked with." I closed my eyes. It had been weeks of cold legal language veiled threats and people reducing my mother to assets. Hearing someone speak of her like a human being nearly undid me. "Thank you," I said. "I used to work with Harold before he retired," Daniel continued. "I handled some account reviews for your mother over the years. Is there something I can help with?" I hesitated. Mother's card said, "Ask for Harold, not Daniel." But Harold was gone, and there was something in Daniel's voice. Not just kindness, but recognition. He knew more than the receptionist. I found a key, I said carefully, and a note from my mother. To a safe deposit box. Yes, box 317. Daniel was quiet again. Then he said, "Mrs. Brooks, would you be able to come into the branch?" When? Today, if possible. The urgency in his tone made my skin prickle. I looked at the clock. It was 10:18 in the morning. I can be there in 30 minutes. Bring identification, he said. And the key. I almost hung up, but then he added one more thing. And Mrs. Brooks, yes, please don't discuss this appointment with anyone connected to the estate until we've spoken. My hand tightened around the phone. I wasn't planning to. When I arrived at First Buckeye Bank, I parked 2 blocks away instead of in the bank lot. I felt foolish doing it like some woman in a television mystery. But fear changes the way you move through the world. Every car behind me felt familiar. Every person glancing at me felt like a warning. The bank sat on the corner of a brick shopping plaza between a pharmacy and a small bakery. Mother had banked there since Daddy's first steady paycheck. She said big banks treated old women like account numbers, but First Buckeye still looked her in the eye. Inside, the air smelled faintly of carpet cleaner and coffee. A teller directed me to a glass-walled office near the back. Daniel Harper stood when I entered. He was in his early 70s, with silver hair, wire-rimmed glasses, and a navy cardigan over his shirt and tie. He did not look like a man built for drama. He looked like a man who saved receipts, arrived early, and read every line before signing anything. Mrs. Brooks, he said, offering his hand. I'm Daniel. Anthony, I said. Please. He nodded. Anthony. He closed the office door after I sat down. That small action made my pulse quicken. I don't want to alarm you, he began. That sentence usually means I should be alarmed. A sad smile touched his face. Your mother always said you were direct. She raised me that way. He folded his hands on the desk. I knew Eleanor for more than 25 years. I helped with some of her investment transfers after your father died. I also reviewed her accounts annually after Harold retired. Then maybe you can tell me why my mother would leave almost everything to Michael and Emily. Daniel's expression did not change, but his eyes sharpened. So that's what they told you. The room seemed to tilt. What do you mean? I mean, he said slowly, that based on the records I've seen over the years, that does not align with your mother's instructions. My throat tightened. You knew. I knew what she intended as of the last formal review I handled. She was very clear that you were to be the primary fiduciary for the family trust and the house. I put one hand on this armrest. Family trust. Daniel leaned back. You weren't told about it, no. His mouth tightened. That concerns me. A strange laugh escaped me, thin and humorless. That makes 2 of us. Daniel opened a folder on his desk. I can't disclose everything without proper verification and documentation, but I can tell you this. Several weeks before your mother passed, there was a request for information regarding certain account transfers and beneficiary records from who it came through channels connected to the estate office. Richard Lawson. I can't formally accuse anyone, Daniel said, but the request referenced his office. I thought of Linda Foster's voice. Pleasant, smooth, waiting. What kind of request? Change confirmations, balance verifications, copies of beneficiary forms. At first, nothing extraordinary. But after your mother died, a set of documents came through that did not match earlier records we had on file. My heart began to pound. What documents? Documents indicating that investment proceeds and account notifications should be directed to Emily Carter. I stared at him. Emily. Yes, she was not my mother's financial representative. No, Daniel said. She was not. I whispered. Then how did that happen? That's one of the reasons I asked you to come in. He removed his glasses, cleaned them slowly with a cloth, then put them back on. Anthony, there were inconsistencies. Dates that didn't line up. account references that looked copied from older forms. One electronic authorization appeared to have been submitted while your mother was hospitalized. The word hospitalized settled between us like thunder. March 14th, I asked. Daniel looked at me carefully. That date appears in more than one place. I felt suddenly cold. That's the day they claim she signed the amendment. Daniel did not answer quickly. Then he said, "Have you signed any waiver or acknowledgement?" "No." "Good." The word came out with such quiet force that tears sprang to my eyes. Good. For weeks, everyone had treated my refusal as selfishness. Daniel Harper said it like I had saved myself from a trap. He stood. "Before we discuss the box, there is something else you should know." I braced myself. Because of the discrepancies, I flagged the estate-related transfers for internal review. "What does that mean?" "It means the bank has not released certain funds." I blinked. "They think the money is already theirs." "I'm sure they do," he said. For the first time, a small flicker of satisfaction moved through me. Daniel continued. "After I flagged the file, compliance initiated an audit. Not a full criminal investigation, not yet, but a formal audit of the account activity document trail and authorization history." The word audit seemed to fill the office. Audit. Not my grief. Not my suspicion. Not my emotional reaction. A process. A record. A trail. "When did this start?" I asked. 2 days ago." 2 days ago. Around the same time, Emily was throwing away letters and checking upstairs closets. "Do Michael and Emily know?" "Not from me," Daniel said. "But if transfers remain delayed, someone will start asking questions. And Richard. He may already know a hold was placed." My stomach twisted. Daniel walked to a locked cabinet and removed a sign-in binder. Now he said about box 317. I pulled the brass key from my purse and placed it on the desk. He looked at it with recognition. "Yes," he said quietly. "That is one of ours." He checked my identification, asked me to sign a visitor log, then led me through a side door into the safe deposit area. The hallway felt colder than the rest of the bank. My shoes made small echoes against the tile. At the vault door, Daniel paused. "Your mother updated access rules on this box 9 years ago," he said. "She listed herself as primary and named a successor." My fingers trembled. "Who?" He looked at me. "You." For a moment, I could not move. Mother had not forgotten me. She had not erased me. Even before I saw what was inside, that truth wrapped around me like a blanket. Daniel inserted the bank's guard key. I inserted Mother's brass key. Together, we pulled out the long metal box. He carried it to a private viewing room and set it on the table. "It'll give you privacy," he said. "But before I step out, I need you to understand something. If this box contains estate documents, do not remove or destroy anything without legal advice. Photographing may be safer until your attorney reviews it." "My attorney," I said bitterly. "Right now, I don't have one." Daniel looked at me with quiet seriousness. "Then you need one." He left the room. I stood alone with box 317. My hands hovered over the lid. I thought of Mother in her robe. Mother in the hospital bed. Mother's handwriting in the notebook. The original is safe where only honesty can reach. Then I opened it. Inside were several envelopes, a small stack of savings bonds, old jewelry wrapped in tissue, and a sealed manila folder with my name written across the front. Anthony. Not Michael. Not Emily. Me. I touched the folder, but did not open it yet. My vision blurred so badly I had to sit down. For the first time since Mother's death, I felt her near me, not as a memory, not as grief, but as guidance. Behind all the lies, all the pressure, all the altered papers, my mother had left one honest door, and she had left me the key. I did not open the manila folder right away. For nearly a full minute, I simply sat in that small private room at First Buckeye Bank with my mother's handwriting in front of me. Anthony. Just my name. No explanation. No legal language. No cold witness lines. Just the name she had given me written by the hand everyone else was trying to imitate. When I finally loosened the metal clasp and opened the folder, the first thing I saw was a letter. My dearest Anthony, if you are reading this, then I was right to worry. My breath caught so hard it hurt. I pressed one hand over my heart and kept reading. Mother's letter was only 2 pages written in her uneven blue ink. She said she had become concerned during the last year of her life because Michael had started asking too many questions about what would happen later. Emily had offered to help organize her accounts and emails, but Mother had noticed documents moved, passwords changed, and papers disappearing from drawers. I had to stop reading. The room seemed to spin. Mother had known. Not fully, maybe. Not enough to accuse them directly, but enough to hide the truth where they could not easily reach it. She wrote that she had reviewed her estate plan with Harold Whitman years earlier, and again with Daniel Harper before Harold retired. She wrote that the original instructions had not changed. I was to receive the house, manage the family trust, and make sure certain charitable gifts were honored. Then came one sentence that broke me. You stayed when staying was hard, and I want the record to show that love is not the same as convenience. Tears fell onto my blouse. Inside the folder beneath the letter were copies of legal documents. The original trust summary, a prior will, a notarized memorandum, a list of account numbers. There was also a sealed envelope marked to be opened with legal counsel. I did not open that one. Daniel's warning echoed in my mind. Photographing may be safer. With trembling hands, I took pictures of every page using my phone. I photographed the letter, the trust summary, the bank receipt, the envelope, the date stamps, the notary seal, everything. Then I saw a page clipped to the back. It was not from Mother. It was a printout from the bank's system showing account contact information. One line had been circled in red. Mailing address updated Emily Carter 1186, Briarwood Court, Dublin, Ohio. The date of the change was March 16th, 2 days after the alleged will amendment. 2 days after Mother had supposedly signed everything from home while actually lying in a hospital bed. I stared at the printout until the numbers blurred. Emily's address, not Michael's, not Richard Lawson's office. Emily's. My niece had not just benefited from the altered documents. She had positioned herself to receive the notices. I put everything back exactly as I had found it, except for Mother's personal letter, which I hesitated over. I wanted to take it with me. I wanted to sleep with it under my pillow like a child. But fear won over longing. I photographed it again, then returned it to the folder. When I stepped out, Daniel was waiting near the hallway, his expression careful. Did you find something? He asked. I swallowed. Yes, enough to contact an attorney, more than enough. He nodded slowly, as if he had expected that answer. Back in his office, he closed the door again and opened a slim folder of his own. I need to be very precise now, he said. The audit has already identified several discrepancies. I sat forward. Several. Yes. First, the paper trail for the amended estate documents does not align with the bank's prior records. Second, the account direction forms that requested Emily Carter's address were submitted through a digital channel using credentials linked to your mother's email. My mother barely used email. I know. She asked me how to print recipes from the internet every other week. Daniel's mouth tightened. That is one reason the activity was flagged. He turned one page toward me. Third, the electronic authorization stamp was generated from an IP address that does not match your mother's home, the hospital, or Richard Lawson's office. He turned one page toward me. Third, the electronic authorization stamp was generated from an IP address that does not match your mother's home, the hospital, or Richard Lawson's office. My pulse hammered in my ears. Where did it come from? I cannot disclose that yet. Compliance is still reviewing it, but I can tell you it was not where the documents claim it was. I thought of Emily's laptop, her phone, the way she moved through Mother's house with a clipboard like a project manager, and the signature I asked. That will need expert review. But the audit noted the scanned signature appears sharper than the rest of the document. What does that mean? It may have been inserted from another source. I sat back as if someone had struck me. Inserted. A copied signature. A pasted identity. My mother's name used like a tool. Daniel continued. There are also inconsistencies in page formatting. The amendment appears to contain pages produced from different print batches. I remembered the pages Richard slid across the table. Clean. Official. Untouchable. But paper remembered what people tried to hide. Could this reverse everything I asked? Daniel chose his words carefully. An audit does not decide inheritance by itself. But if the documents are proven altered or improperly executed, they can be challenged. And if financial instructions were changed through misrepresentation, transfers can be frozen or reversed. Frozen or reversed. That was the first time I understood the title of my own nightmare. My family had altered inheritance papers, but the audit could reverse it. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt sick, because every new fact made the betrayal larger. This was not Michael misunderstanding Mother's wishes. It was not Emily being opportunistic after the funeral. It was a plan with dates, addresses, electronic traces, and missing pages. And somewhere in that plan was Richard Lawson's office. What about Linda Foster? I asked. Daniel looked up. Who? Richard's assistant. Her name is on the witness line. His face grew still. Linda Foster witnessed the amendment. Yes, at your mother's residence. That's what the document says. He tapped his pen once against the desk, then stopped himself. Anthony, I can't speak for the legal side, but if your mother was hospitalized at the time that witness statement becomes extremely important. I know. Do you have proof of hospitalization? My calendar. Not records yet. Get the records, he said, and get counsel before Richard's office pressures you again. As if summoned by his name, my phone buzzed. Michael. I let it ring. A voicemail appeared, then a text. Where are you? I stared at it. Another text came seconds later. Emily says you went to the bank. What are you doing? My blood turned cold. I looked up at Daniel. They know I'm here. His expression changed immediately. Did you tell anyone? No. Did you park in the lot? No. He stood and walked to the office window, looking toward the street. My phone buzzed again. Anthony, don't do something stupid. This time, the message was from Emily. I felt something inside me shift. Fear was still there, but anger rose above it. For weeks, they had treated me like a grieving fool. Yet now, the moment I touched the truth, they panicked. Daniel turned back to me. Do not respond. I wasn't going to. Good. Leave through the side entrance. I'll have someone walk you out. I gathered my purse, my phone, and the copy of the visitor log Daniel gave me. Before I left, he placed a business card in my hand. Call Sarah Mitchell, he said. She's an estate attorney. She helped one of our clients in a contested trust matter last year. She is careful, and she does not scare easily. I looked down at the card. Sarah Mitchell, attorney at law. For the first time, I had a name that did not feel like a threat. When I got home, I locked every door and sat at my kitchen table. My phone had 7 missed calls. 3 from Michael, 2 from Emily, 1 from Richard Lawson's office, 1 unknown number. I did not answer any of them. Instead, I opened the photos I had taken from Mother's folder and enlarged the image of her letter. You stayed when staying was hard. I began to cry again, but this time the tears did not feel helpless. They felt like a promise. Michael and Emily had changed addresses, moved papers, copied signatures, and tried to bury the truth under legal language. They thought I would be too tired, too old, too heartbroken, too afraid of conflict to keep asking questions. They were wrong. The audit had found the first cracks, and behind those cracks, the whole lie was beginning to collapse. I called Sarah Mitchell the next morning at 8:03. I had barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my mother's handwriting, Emily's address on the bank record, and Michael's text glowing on my phone like a threat. Sarah's receptionist answered on the second ring. Mitchell Law Office. My name is Anthony Brooks, I said. Daniel Harper from First Buckeye Bank gave me this number. I need help with my mother's estate. There was a pause, then the receptionist's voice became gentler. Let me see if Miss Mitchell has an opening. I expected to wait days, maybe weeks. Instead, Sarah came on the line herself less than a minute later. Mrs. Brooks. Yes, this is Sarah Mitchell. Daniel left me a brief message yesterday evening. He said your matter may be urgent. My throat tightened with gratitude. It is. Have you signed anything waiving your right to contest, no? Good. Have you received pressure to sign yes? From whom? My brother, my niece, and the attorney who handled the will. Sarah was quiet for half a beat. Then bring everything you have. Copies, photos, notes, texts, emails, calendars. Do not organize it perfectly. Just bring it. When? Can you come at 11? I looked at the clock. Yes. And Mrs. Brooks? Yes. Do not speak with your brother, your niece, or Mr. Lawson before you come in. I almost laughed. That seems to be everyone's advice. It is good advice. Sarah Mitchell's office was nothing like Richard Lawson's. No glass walls, no polished conference table designed to make ordinary people feel small. Her office was in a renovated brick building near German Village above a small bookstore. The stairs creaked. A fern sat in the window. The waiting room had mismatched chairs and a bowl of peppermints on the table. Sarah stepped out to greet me herself. She was probably in her early 50s, with dark blonde hair pulled into a low bun and reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. She wore a gray suit, flat shoes, and the calm expression of a woman who had heard every kind of lie and no longer startled easily. Anthony, she asked. Yes, I'm Sarah. Come on back. Her office was warm, lined with bookshelves and stacked files. She did not offer false sympathy. She did not tilt her head and tell me grief made everything harder. She simply motioned to the chair across from her desk and said, "Start wherever you can." That nearly broke me. For weeks, everyone had wanted me to stop talking. Sarah wanted me to begin, so I told her. I told her about Mother, about the years I cared for her, about Michael's sudden interest in paperwork, about Emily's folder at the kitchen table. I told her about the will reading the March 14th date, the signature that looked too smooth, and Richard's claim that the location error was clerical. Sarah wrote notes without interrupting. Then I told her about Mother's notebook, the safe deposit key, Daniel Harper, the bank audit, Emily's address change, and the manila folder marked with my name. Only once did Sarah stop me. "Did you remove anything from the safe deposit box?" "No, I photographed it." She nodded. "Good." I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos. She leaned forward, enlarging each image carefully. The letter from Mother, the trust summary, the mailing address update, the bank receipt, the sealed envelope marked for legal counsel. When she reached the photo of Mother's sentence, "You stayed when staying was hard," Sarah paused longer than necessary. Then she looked up at me. "Your mother trusted you." My eyes burned. "Yes," I whispered. "She did." Sarah sat back. "I'll be direct. I cannot promise an outcome today, but I can tell you this, you are not imagining things. There are enough irregularities here to justify immediate action." For the first time in weeks, I felt air enter my lungs all the way. "What kind of action?" "First, I'll send a preservation letter to Richard Lawson, Michael Brooks, and Emily Carter. That means they are formally instructed not to destroy, alter, sell, transfer, discard, or conceal estate-related documents or property. They've already started selling furniture." Sarah's pen stopped. "Do you have proof?" "Photos. Texts. A neighbor saw the truck." "Good. Send me everything." "Second, we request full copies of the estate file from Richard Lawson's office, including drafts, communications, execution notes, witness information, notary records, and metadata if any digital preparation was involved." "Will he give that to you?" "He may resist, but resistance tells its own story." I thought of Richard's smooth voice. "He'll say I'm emotional." Sarah's expression did not change. "People often call women emotional when they are afraid of calling them correct." I stared at her. Then, despite everything, I smiled. She continued. "Third, we obtain your mother's medical records for March 14th. If she was hospitalized and the document says she signed at home, that is a serious problem. If medication or capacity is also an issue, that becomes even more serious. I have my calendar. Your calendar helps establish a timeline. Hospital records support it." I nodded. Fourth, Sarah said we notify the probate court that there is a potential contest and request that distributions be paused pending review. My hands twisted in my lap. "Michael will explode." "Let him." The simplicity of it startled me. For so long, my whole family had trained itself around Michael's reactions. If Michael was upset, everyone softened. If Michael was angry, Mother paid. If Michael was embarrassed, I smoothed things over. If Michael needed help, somebody sacrificed. Let him. 2 small words and a lifetime shifted. Sarah was still reviewing my photos when my phone buzzed. Michael again. I silenced it. A minute later, Emily called. I silenced that too. Then came a text. "You need to stop before you embarrass yourself." I showed it to Sarah. She read it once. "Do not respond. I won't." Another text arrived. Grandma made her choice. "You're proving why she didn't trust you with everything." My face went hot. Sarah held out her hand. "May I?" I gave her the phone. She took a screenshot and sent it to her office email. "This is useful," she said. "It feels cruel." It can be both. By the time I left Sarah's office, I had signed a representation agreement. She reduced the initial fee after I admitted I was worried about money. We will start narrow. By the time I left Sarah's office, I had signed a representation agreement. She reduced the initial fee after I admitted I was worried about money. "We will start narrow," she said. "Preserve the estate. Secure records, review evidence. One step at a time." When I stepped outside, the sky had turned gray. Rain threatened, but had not yet fallen. I stood under the awning, feeling older than 68, and somehow stronger than I had that morning. Then I saw Michael. He was across the street beside his truck, arms folded, watching me. For a second, my whole body locked. He crossed before I could move. So this is what we're doing now. He was across the street beside his truck, arms folded, watching me. For a second, my whole body locked. He crossed before I could move. So this is what we're doing now, he said. I looked around. People were walking in and out of the bookstore below Sarah's office. A woman with a stroller passed behind him. For once, we were not alone in a kitchen, a hallway, or a quiet office where he could control the tone. I have an attorney, I said. His jaw tightened. You have lost your mind. No, I found help. You're going to tear this family apart over money. I looked at him, really looked at him. You keep saying money because you don't want to say truth. He stepped closer. Mother wanted me to have that house. No, I found help. You're going to tear this family apart over money. I looked at him, really looked at him. You keep saying money because you don't want to say truth. He stepped closer. Mother wanted me to have that house. Then the real records will prove that. His eyes flickered. Just once. But I saw it. You don't know what you're getting into, he said. No, Michael. I think you're afraid I do. His face flushed dark red. For a moment, I thought he might shout, but there were people nearby, and Michael had always cared more about appearances than truth. So he lowered his voice. Emily is furious. I'm not responsible for Emily's feelings. She loved Mom. Then she should have honored her. He stared at me as if I had slapped him. I walked past him toward my car. Behind me, he said, You'll regret this. I stopped, turned, and gave my brother the calmest look I could manage. I already regret trusting you. Then I got in my car and locked the door. My hands shook so hard, I had to sit there before starting the engine. Michael remained on the sidewalk, watching like a man who had just realized the woman he thought he could silence had found her voice. As I drove away, rain finally began to fall. But for the first time since Mother died, I did not feel like I was drowning. I felt like the storm had changed direction. Sarah moved faster than I expected. By Monday morning, Richard Lawson's office had received her preservation letter. Michael and Emily had received copies by certified mail and email. First Buckeye Bank had received a formal request to preserve account records, login histories, address change documents, and all estate-related communications. Riverside Methodist Hospital had received a request for Mother's records from March 14th. For the first time since the will reading, I was not standing alone with trembling hands and a folder full of questions. Someone had put my questions into legal language. Someone had told them in writing that the truth had to be preserved. And they hated it. Michael called 6 times before noon. Emily sent one long message that began with, I cannot believe you would do this to Dad, and ended with Grandma would be ashamed. I read that last sentence 3 times. Then I turned my phone face down. Mother would have been ashamed, yes. But not of me. At 2 p.m, Sarah called. I received a response from First Buckeye, she said. Daniel Harper has been very cooperative within the limits of bank policy. We have enough preliminary information to confirm something important. My hand tightened around the phone. What? There was a family trust. I sat down slowly at my kitchen table. You're sure? Yes. Eleanor Brooks created the Eleanor M. Brooks Family Trust 9 years ago. It was designed to hold certain investment assets and eventually receive proceeds from selected accounts. You were named successor trustee. Successor trustee. The words sounded official, almost distant. But beneath them was something deeply personal. Mother had not simply intended to leave me something. She had trusted me to carry out her wishes. What did the trust say? I asked. Based on the summary and the bank's records, you were supposed to manage distributions after your mother's passing. The house was to pass to you directly while the trust provided specific gifts to Michael, educational support for certain younger relatives, and charitable donations. I closed my eyes. That sounded like Mother. Fair but careful. Generous but not foolish. She didn't cut them out, I whispered. No, Sarah said. She didn't. In fact, Michael was still provided for, but he was not given control. There it was. Control. That was what this had always been about. Not just money. Not just property. Control over the house. Control over the story. Control over what Mother had built and who got to speak for her after she was gone. Sarah continued. The issue is that notices connected to the trust review and certain account confirmations were redirected. To Emily's address, I said. Yes. That change appears to have been made after your mother's hospitalization began. There were also email updates connected to your mother's online banking profile. My mother didn't know how to do that. That will matter. I looked at the recipe card on my refrigerator. Mother's handwriting, faded but familiar. She had once called me because the television remote would not work, only to discover she was pointing it at the microwave. The idea of her navigating online banking settings from a hospital bed would have been funny if it had not been so cruel. Sarah, I said, did Emily know about the trust? That's what we need to establish. But the records suggest someone knew enough to divert communications before the estate was opened. I pressed my palm against the table. How far back does it go? At least several months before your mother died. Several months. A chill moved through me. That meant the plan had not begun at the funeral. It had not begun in Richard Lawson's conference room. It had not even begun after Mother's death. It had begun while she was still alive. While I was bringing soup, changing sheets, counting pills, and sitting beside her bed, someone else was studying her documents and preparing to rewrite her wishes. That realization hurt differently. Death had taken my mother once. Now betrayal was reaching backward, staining the months I thought were sacred. I need you to breathe, Sarah said gently. I had not realized I was holding my breath. I'm all right, I lied. No, you're not, but you're steady enough to keep going. That was one thing I liked about Sarah. She did not decorate pain. She respected it by telling the truth. Later that afternoon, she asked me to come to her office. When I arrived, she had a timeline spread across her desk. Dates, notes, arrows, names. March 10th, Eleanor admitted to Riverside Methodist Hospital. March 14th, alleged execution of amended will at residence. March 16th, mailing address update to Emily Carter. March 18th, electronic authorization submitted. April 2nd, inquiry from Lawson office regarding account balances. May through August, repeated attempts to confirm asset transfer instructions. October 3rd, Eleanor Brooks passed away. October 11th, amended will presented. I stared at the timeline until my eyes burned. There it is, Sarah said quietly. A story told by dates. A terrible story. Yes, but a useful one. I pointed to March 18th. What was that electronic authorization? Sarah folded her hands. According to the preliminary audit summary, someone used your mother's email credentials to approve a document request connected to her investment accounts. That request supported the later redirection of notices. Can they tell who did it? Not yet, but the IP records may help. The bank audit team is preserving them. And Richard? We requested his office file. His response was brief. He denies wrongdoing and says your mother personally instructed the amendment. I let out a bitter breath. From her hospital room, he did not address that. Of course he didn't. Sarah looked at me over her glasses. He also claimed the location listed on the document was a clerical error. I almost smiled, but there was no humor in it. That phrase again. Yes, Sarah said. Repeated language is often revealing. She handed me a copy of Richard's response. The words were polished, professional, and empty. He expressed concern over family conflict. He stated that Eleanor Brooks had expressed changing intentions. He insisted that the amendment had been properly witnessed and notarized. He warned that unsupported accusations could unnecessarily diminish estate assets. There it was again. Pressure disguised as concern. He's still trying to scare me, I said. He is trying to make continued questioning feel expensive, Sarah replied. That is not the same as proving you wrong. I read the response again, slower this time. My grief had made me feel small in Richard's office. But sitting across from Sarah with dates and documents spread out before us, I saw something clearly. Richard's confidence depended on everyone accepting the paperwork without looking underneath it. But now we were underneath it. Sarah pulled another paper from her folder. This came from the bank audit notes. It is not final, and we cannot treat it as conclusive yet, but I want you to see it. It was a record of attempted mail delivery confirmations. 3 notices had been sent to Emily Carter's address regarding trust-related account verification. 2 were marked delivered. 1 was signed for. The signature line read, E. Carter. I stared at it. She signed for them. Yes. So she knew. Sarah was careful. It strongly suggests she received trust-related notices addressed to your mother or connected to your mother's accounts. She knew. I said again, more firmly. This was no longer a niece accidentally benefiting from confusion. Emily had received the notices. Emily had watched me sit in that conference room blindsided and humiliated while she already knew there had been another structure in place. My voice shook. She sat there and let me believe my mother had erased me. Sarah said nothing, which was kinder than any empty comfort. I thought of Emily's cream blazer, her perfect hair, her smooth voice. Grandma knew what she wanted. Maybe it's just hard for you to accept. She had said that while knowing notices had gone to her house. For the first time, anger burned hotter than grief. What happens now? I asked. Now, we request a temporary halt to estate administration. We push for hospital records. We request the notary log. We seek witness statements, and depending on what the bank audit finalizes, we may ask the court for a forensic review of the amendment and the trust. If the trust documents in the safe deposit box match the bank's records, then your mother's original plan becomes very important. She didn't abandon me, I said. The words came out before I could stop them. Sarah's face softened. No, she said. From what I've seen, she did not. I looked down at the timeline. The dates still hurt. The betrayal still sat heavy in my chest. But beneath it, something precious had returned to me. For weeks, Michael and Emily had tried to make me question my memory, my judgment, even my place in my mother's heart. They wanted me to believe I had misunderstood years of care, years of promises, years of quiet conversations at the kitchen table. But the trust said otherwise. The redirected notices said otherwise. My mother's letter said otherwise. When I left Sarah's office that evening, I did not feel victorious. Not yet. There was still too much ahead, too many records to gather, too many lies to untangle. But I felt anchored. My mother had not forgotten me. She had left a paper trail of love, and even though my family had tried to reroute it, hide it, and bury it under signatures that were not hers, the truth had found its way back. This time, I was not going to let it go. The hospital records arrived on a Thursday morning. Sarah called me before I even finished my coffee. Anthony, She said we have Riverside's records. I sat down so quickly the chair scraped the floor, and your mother was admitted on March 10th and remained hospitalized through March 21st. On March 14th, she was in room 412. She was receiving oxygen antibiotics and intermittent pain medication. There is also a nursing note stating she was confused at 2:10 p.m. I closed my eyes. Room 412, just like my calendar said, so she could not have signed at home. No, Sarah said. She could not have signed at home. Those words did something to me. They did not erase the pain, but they gave my memory back its dignity. I had not been exaggerating. I had not been confused. I had not been too emotional. I had remembered the truth. Sarah continued, "There's more. The hospital visitor log shows Michael Brooks checked in at 4:12 p.m. Emily Carter checked in at 4:57 p.m. My hand went cold around the phone. That was when I went home to shower. I know, your calendar supports that. I stared at the table, remembering Michael in the hallway, Emily in Mother's room, something going into her purse. What do we do now? We go back to the bank, Sarah said. This time together. That afternoon, Sarah and I met Daniel Harper at First Buckeye Bank. I wore the same navy dress I had worn to the will, reading, not because I wanted to relive that day, but because I wanted to reclaim it. That dress had sat with me in humiliation. Now it would sit with me in truth. Daniel greeted Sarah with professional respect, then turned to me. Are you ready? He asked. No, I said honestly. But I'm here. He nodded. That is often the same thing. We went again through the side door, down the quiet hallway, into the safe deposit area. This time, Sarah carried a legal folder and a small portable scanner. Daniel signed his access paperwork. I signed mine. Together, we opened box 317 again. The metal box looked ordinary, almost disappointing. How strange that something so plain could hold the difference between being erased and being believed. In the private viewing room, Sarah put on thin cotton gloves. We will inventory everything, she said. Slowly. Daniel stood near the door as witness, but did not interfere. Sarah removed the envelopes one by one. Old savings bonds, jewelry wrapped in tissue, insurance summaries, a deed copy. Then the manila folder with my name. She opened it carefully. This time, she did not stop at photographs. She examined every page. The trust summary came first, then a notarized memorandum, then copies of earlier estate documents. Finally, inside the sealed envelope marked, "To be opened with legal counsel." Sarah found the document that made the room go silent. It was Mother's original will. Not a copy with uncertain pages. Not an amendment with a strange signature. Not a document prepared under suspicious dates. The original. Sarah read the first page quietly, her eyes moving line by line. Daniel folded his hands in front of him. I gripped the edge of the table. Then Sarah looked up. This will predates the amendment by 9 years, but it references the trust and confirms the house distribution. My throat tightened. What does it say? Sarah turned the page so I could see. My mother's signature was at the bottom. Uneven. Familiar. Real. Eleanor May Brooks. The letters trembled exactly the way they had in her Bible. The small break between Eleanor and Brooks was there. The B looped imperfectly. It was not polished. It was not smooth. It was my mother. I touched the air above the page without touching the ink. Sarah read aloud. To my daughter, Anthony Brooks. I leave my residence located on Ashbury Lane in Columbus, Ohio, including the land fixtures, family records, photographs, and personal effects contained therein unless otherwise specifically designated. I covered my mouth. The house. Mother had left me the house, not because I imagined it, not because grief had rewritten memory, because she wrote it, signed it, sealed it, and hid it where honesty could reach. Sarah continued. To my son, Michael Brooks. I leave the sum specified in Schedule B to be distributed through the family trust in equal installments, provided no contest or interference with administration occurs. Sarah paused. I looked at her. What does that mean? It means your mother anticipated conflict. Daniel's face tightened with sadness. Sarah read on. To my granddaughter, Emily Carter. I leave the jewelry listed in Schedule C and educational support for any future children subject to trustee discretion. Not investment accounts, not control, not everything. A few designated gifts handled through trust rules. Mother had not been cruel. She had been careful. Then Sarah found the clause that changed everything. In the event any beneficiary or interested party knowingly alters, conceals, destroys, misrepresents, or submits documents inconsistent with my stated estate plan, such person shall forfeit any discretionary benefit not required by law. Sarah stopped reading. The silence became heavy. I looked at her. She wrote that. She included a forfeiture clause, Sarah said. A strong one. She knew I whispered. She was protecting the estate, Daniel said gently. And you? My eyes filled again. For weeks, Michael and Emily had treated me as if I were an inconvenience to be managed. But Mother, in her quiet way, had already seen the shape of their hunger. She had put a lock on the truth before they knew they would need to break it. Sarah scanned the original will, the trust references, the schedules, the notary pages, and the witness information. The witnesses were not Linda Foster. They were Harold Whitman and a retired school principal named Patricia Moore, one of Mother's oldest friends. Every signature matched a clean timeline. Every page carried the same paper watermark. Every staple hole aligned. Sarah compared it to the amendment Richard had produced. She laid the two signature pages side by side. I did not need to be an expert. One signature breathed, the other performed. The amended document is vulnerable, Sarah said. Very vulnerable. Daniel cleared his throat. The audit team also finished a preliminary metadata review. Sarah turned to him, and the scanned amendment file Richard Lawson's office provided to the bank was created from multiple source files. Several pages were inserted later. The signature page image appears to have been extracted from an older document, then placed into the amendment scan. My knees weakened even though I was sitting. A copied signature, a manufactured will. My mother's name stolen from one truth and pasted onto a lie. Sarah's expression hardened. Do you have that in writing? A preliminary report. I can release it upon proper request or subpoena, depending on compliance approval. You'll have one by tomorrow, Sarah said. I stared at the documents on the table, and the entire story rearranged itself. The strange signature, the hospital date, the address change, Emily's urgency, Michael's warning, Richard's refusal to explain, Linda Foster's witness line. They were not separate oddities anymore. They were pieces of one machine. Who submitted the amendment to probate? I asked. Sarah looked at the file. Richard Lawson, and he had the original. That is one of the questions, she said. If he knew this original existed, he has a problem. If he failed to locate or disclose it, he has another problem. If someone in his office helped replace it, that is worse. Linda Foster's name rose again in my mind. I remembered her pleasant voice, her pause when I asked for Richard, her name on a witness line claiming Mother signed at home while hospital records placed her in room 412. Sarah packed the documents carefully back into their folders after scanning them. She did not remove the originals yet. Instead, she prepared a written inventory for Daniel to witness. Before we closed the box, I asked for 1 minute. Sarah and Daniel stepped just outside the room. I stood alone with Mother's will open before me. For years, I had thought inheritance was about what someone left behind after death. A house, money, jewelry, land. But standing there, I understood that inheritance was also about being known. Mother knew who stayed. She knew who reached. She knew who needed boundaries. She knew who would protect what mattered, and she had chosen me. Not secretly out of favoritism, not unfairly, but carefully, legally, deliberately. I whispered, "Thank you, Mama." Then I closed the folder. When we left the bank, Sarah walked beside me into the late afternoon light. "This changes the case," she said. "How much? A lot." Across the parking lot, my phone buzzed. A text from Emily. "Whatever you think you found, it won't hold up." I showed Sarah. For once, Sarah smiled. "Don't answer," she said. "Let the documents answer." I looked back at the bank at the doors Mother had trusted at the place where her truth had waited patiently while lies made noise. Michael and Emily still had their version. Richard still had his polished letters. But now, we had the original. And the original had my mother's real signature. The audit did not arrive like thunder. It arrived as a thin PDF in Sarah Mitchell's inbox on a Tuesday afternoon with a plain subject line, "Preliminary Compliance Review. Eleanor M. Brooks, Estate Records." Sarah called me in before she opened the full report. "I want you here when I read the key findings," she said. By then, I had learned to recognize the weight behind her calm voice. Sarah never dramatized anything. If she asked me to come in, it meant something important had shifted. Her office felt warmer than it had the first time, but I still sat with both hands clenched around my purse. The fern in the window had grown toward the light. The bowl of peppermints sat untouched. Outside, traffic moved along the street, as if ordinary people were not being broken and rebuilt behind office doors every day. Sarah opened the report on her computer and adjusted her glasses. "Before we begin," she said, "remember, this is preliminary. But preliminary does not mean weak." I nodded. She began reading silently, her eyes moving quickly. Every few moments, she stopped and wrote something on a yellow legal pad. I watched her face. That was how I knew. Not from the words yet, but from the way her jaw slowly tightened. Finally, she turned the screen toward me. "The audit confirms the amended document was assembled from multiple electronic sources." I stared at the lines highlighted in yellow. Multiple source files, inconsistent metadata, signature image mismatch, document creation after alleged execution date. My stomach twisted. After I asked, "Yes," Sarah said. "The final file version of the amendment was created 5 days after March 14th. The room seemed to shrink. So the document they claimed Mother signed on March 14th did not exist in final form until March 19th. That is what this report indicates." I looked at the screen again. March 19th. Mother was still in the hospital. I remembered that day clearly. She had been weak but stubborn, complaining that the scrambled eggs tasted like wet packing peanuts. I had laughed and promised to bring applesauce from home. While I was sitting beside her bed, someone was building a document to steal her voice. Sarah scrolled lower. "There's also a section about the signature." I braced myself. The signature image on the amendment appears to match a signature from an older document in Richard Lawson's archived estate file. I whispered, "They copied it." The audit cannot say who copied it yet, but yes, it suggests the signature was extracted and reused. My mother's name lifted like a photograph from one page and pasted onto another. A strange calm came over me. Not peace, something colder. A stillness that arrives when pain becomes too precise to process all at once. Sarah continued. "The witness page is also problematic. The report indicates the witness page was scanned separately from the main body. Different resolution, different paper tone, different timestamp. Linda Foster, I said. Yes, her name is there. Did they find anything connecting her? Sarah took a breath. There are internal email references from Richard's office. Not the full content yet, but the audit found file names and routing notes. One includes Linda's initials. What did it say? Sarah looked at her notes. EB Amendment, Revised Beneficiary Page, LF Review. The initials sat between us. LF Linda Foster. I remembered her voice. Law Office of Richard Lawson. This is Linda. Pleasant. Calm. Smooth as glass. Can we prove she did it? Not yet, but this gives us grounds to demand more. Sarah scrolled to another section. The bank audit also traces the online authorization request. Your mother's email credentials were used, but the login IP appears connected to a residential internet service in Dublin. Dublin? Emily lived in Dublin. My hands went numb. Emily, I said. Sarah was careful. It does not name her, but it places the login in the same city as her residence. Combined with the address changed to her home and the signed delivery notices, it is significant. I stared at the screen. Emily had sat in my mother's kitchen with that folder, smiling like she was helping. Emily had come to the hospital after I left. Emily had received trust notices at her own address. Emily had texted me Grandma made her choice, and all the while her digital fingerprints were beginning to glow in the dark. What about Michael? I asked. Sarah moved to another section. Michael signed a beneficiary acknowledgement form 2 weeks after your mother died. In it, he certified that he was unaware of any competing estate documents. I let out a sharp breath. But he knew about the safe deposit box. We don't know that. However, Daniel's audit notes show Michael contacted the bank shortly after your mother's death, asking whether all estate-related accounts would transfer under the amended will. That sounds like he knew enough. Yes, Sarah said. It shows interest and possibly awareness. There's more. Michael also sent a copy of the amendment to the bank before probate acceptance urging release of house-related escrow records and investment information. He was rushing. That appears to be the pattern. Rushing. Rushing me to sign. Rushing the house to market. Rushing furniture out the door. Rushing notices, accounts transfers control. Because time was their enemy. The longer truth sat undisturbed, the more likely someone honest would open the right file. Sarah printed several pages of the audit summary. The printer hummed behind her while I sat in silence. When she handed me the pages, I looked at the highlighted lines. There was no dramatic confession, no villain standing in a courtroom, no shouted admission, but there it was anyway, a map of betrayal. Emily's address, Michael's certification, Linda's initials, Richard's office files, a copied signature, a document created after the date it was supposedly signed. The machine had names now. That evening, Sarah arranged a conference call with Daniel Harper and the bank's compliance officer, a woman named Karen Ellis. Karen spoke with the careful tone of someone trained never to overstate. The bank's position at this time, Karen said, is that estate-related transfers will remain frozen pending resolution. Frozen. I closed my eyes. Michael and Emily had believed the money would move quickly, quietly, obediently. Instead, the audit had locked the door. Karen continued, "We are also preserving all communication logs, document submission records, and electronic access data. If subpoenaed, we will comply according to policy and law." Sarah thanked her. Then Daniel spoke. "Anthony, I want you to know your mother's long-standing instructions were consistent for years. There is no record in our files of her expressing an intent to remove you from the house or from trust management." I pressed my hand to my mouth. Thank you, I managed. After the call ended, Sarah sat back. We are filing tomorrow. With the court? Yes. Petition to challenge the amendment request for temporary restraint on estate transfers, demand for accounting, and request for forensic document review. I nodded slowly. What about Richard? We will put his office on notice. If Linda Foster participated, she will have to answer. If Richard failed to supervise or knowingly submitted a corrupted document, that becomes a serious professional matter. Could they be charged? Sarah's expression turned measured. Possibly. But our immediate focus is civil probate. Stop the false distribution, validate the original estate plan, and protect the assets. Criminal consequences, if any, may come later. I understood. First, save Mother's truth. Consequences could follow. The next morning, before Sarah filed, I received an email from Richard Lawson. The subject line was Family Resolution. The message was brief. Mrs. Brooks, in light of recent misunderstandings, Michael and Emily are willing to discuss a private settlement to avoid unnecessary legal expense and emotional strain. It would be in everyone's best interest to resolve this matter quietly. Quietly. I laughed when I read it, not because it was funny, but because the word revealed everything. When they believed I had nothing, they demanded silence. When I found proof, they offered quiet. I forwarded the email to Sarah. Her response came 5 minutes later. Do not reply. I didn't. That afternoon, Sarah filed the petition. By evening, Michael was at my front door. He rang once, then knocked hard. I looked through the peephole and saw him standing under my porch light, shoulders tense, face pale with anger. Anthony, he shouted, open the door. I did not. My phone buzzed. Open the door. We need to talk like family. I stared at the message. Family. That word had been dragged through so much mud, it barely looked like itself anymore. I typed one sentence. Talk to my attorney. Then I locked the deadbolt and turned off the porch light. Through the door, I heard Michael curse softly. A few seconds later, his footsteps retreated. I stood in the dark hallway, trembling not from weakness, but from the shock of my own boundary holding. For most of my life, I had opened doors when family knocked, even when they came only to take. That night, I left the door closed. And on the other side of it, the people who had altered my mother's papers finally began to understand that I was no longer the easiest page to rewrite. The mediation was scheduled for 9 o'clock on a rainy Wednesday morning. I had always imagined legal battles happened in courtrooms with judges in black robes and people standing dramatically to object. But Sarah told me most family estate disputes did not begin that way. They began in conference rooms with coffee. No one drank folders lined up like weapons, and people pretending they had come to resolve things when really they had come to measure how much truth they could survive. The mediation center was on the 3rd floor of a downtown building, not far from Richard Lawson's office. The hallway smelled of wet coats and copier toner. I arrived with Sarah at 8:35, wearing a gray dress, low heels, and mother's gold bracelet. I had worn that bracelet to the first will reading, when I still believed family shame could be avoided by staying quiet. This time, I wore it as armor. Sarah placed a hand lightly on my shoulder before we entered our assigned room. Remember, she said, you do not have to convince them. You only have to stay steady while the evidence speaks. I nodded though my stomach was twisting. Our room was small, with a round table, a window overlooking the parking garage, and a tray of bottled water. Sarah laid out her files with careful precision. The original will copy, the hospital records, the audit summary, the trust documents, the screenshots of Emily's texts, the photo of the sticky note from the trash bag, the preservation letter. Richard's response. Each stack had a tab. Dates, documents, conduct, relief. I stared at those tabs and thought how strange it was that a family could collapse into categories. At 8:58, voices came from the hallway. Michael's voice first. Low, irritated, then Emily's, tight controlled, then Richard Lawson's, smooth as ever. I gripped the edge of the table. Sarah noticed, but said nothing. A few minutes later, the mediator came in. His name was Thomas Green, a retired probate judge with silver eyebrows and a voice that made every sentence sound like it had been weighed carefully before being allowed into the room. He explained the process. We would begin together. Each side would make a statement. Then we might separate into rooms while he went back and forth. We are here, he said, to determine whether this matter can be resolved without further litigation. Resolved. Such a gentle word for a room full of knives. When we entered the main conference room, Michael and Emily were already seated beside Richard. Michael wore a navy suit that did not quite fit across the shoulders. Emily wore a black dress and pearls. Mother's pearls, I realized. My breath caught. They were the small pearl earrings Emily had searched for the morning of the funeral. She had them in her ears. For a moment, all the legal documents faded. All I saw was my niece wearing my mother's pearls while defending the theft of my mother's wishes. Emily noticed me looking and lifted her chin slightly. Sarah leaned close and whispered, "Steady." I sat across from them. Michael did not meet my eyes. Emily did. Richard Lawson opened a leather portfolio and arranged his papers with theatrical calm. The mediator began. Mr. Lawson, since your side submitted the amended document to probate, you may begin. Richard folded his hands. Thank you, Judge Green. This matter is unfortunate. Eleanor Brooks was a strong-willed woman who had the right to make changes to her estate plan. My clients recognize that Mrs. Anthony Brooks is grieving and disappointed, but disappointment does not invalidate a properly executed amendment. There it was again. Grieving, disappointed. Small words meant to shrink me. Richard continued. The family wishes to avoid unnecessary conflict. Michael Brooks and Emily Carter are willing, despite the validity of the amendment, to offer Mrs. Brooks a modest settlement, including certain sentimental items and a cash distribution in exchange for withdrawal of her objections. A modest settlement. Sentimental items. I felt heat rise in my face. Sarah wrote one word on her pad and turned it slightly so I could see. Breathe. The mediator looked at Sarah. Ms. Mitchell. Sarah did not stand. She simply opened her first folder. This matter is not about disappointment. It is about an altered estate document, a false execution location, a copied signature, redirected trust notices, and an original will found in the decedent's safe deposit box. The room changed. Not loudly, but Michael's shoulders stiffened. Emily's lips pressed together. Richard's eyes sharpened. Sarah slid copies of the hospital records toward the mediator. On March 14th, the date the amendment was allegedly signed at Eleanor Brooks's residence, Mrs. Brooks was hospitalized at Riverside Methodist Hospital in room 412. Judge Green adjusted his glasses. Sarah continued. The hospital records show oxygen treatment medication administration and a nursing note documenting confusion that afternoon. The visitor log shows Michael Brooks and Emily Carter both visited during the window when Anthony Brooks was away from the hospital. Michael shifted. That doesn't mean anything, he muttered. The mediator looked at him. You will have a chance to respond. Sarah placed the amendment beside the hospital record. The amendment states execution occurred at the residence. Mr. Lawson has referred to this as a clerical error. But the bank's preliminary compliance review reveals the final electronic version of this amendment was created 5 days after the alleged signing date. For the first time, Richard spoke without polish. That report is preliminary. It is, Sarah said, and we intend to subpoena the underlying data. Richard's jaw tightened. Sarah turned another page. The same review indicates the signature image on the amendment appears to have been extracted from an older document in Mr. Lawson's archived estate file. The mediator looked up sharply. Emily's face lost color. I watched her hand move to her pearl earring, then drop. Sarah continued with a calm that felt almost merciless. The witness page bearing the name Linda Foster was scanned separately. Its metadata differs from the body of the document, and the document's witness statement places Ms. Foster at Eleanor Brooks's residence on a day when Eleanor Brooks was hospitalized. Richard's voice hardened. Ms. Foster acted in accordance with office procedure. Sarah turned to him. Then we will need her sworn testimony explaining that procedure. Silence. There it was, the first crack in Richard's wall. Sarah moved to the trust documents. Additionally, the original estate plan found in Eleanor Brooks's safe deposit box names Anthony Brooks as recipient of the Ashbury Lane residence and successor trustee of the Eleanor M. Brooks Family Trust. Michael finally looked at me. His face was not angry now. It was afraid. Sarah placed the delivery confirmations on the table. Trust-related notices were redirected to Emily Carter's residence after Eleanor Brooks entered the hospital. At least 2 notices were delivered. One was signed for by E. Carter. Emily sat forward. That doesn't prove I knew what they were. Sarah looked at her. Then you can explain under oath why trust-related notices connected to your grandmother's accounts were sent to your address, signed for at your address, and never disclosed to Anthony Brooks. Emily's mouth opened, then closed. The room was so quiet, I could hear rain tapping against the window. Sarah then placed the sticky note in front of the mediator. This note was recovered from a trash bag of family papers removed from Eleanor Brooks's home. It reads, "Check upstairs closet again. Make sure no bank papers left." Judge Green read it slowly. "Whose handwriting is this?" he asked. No one answered. I looked at Emily. She looked away. That moment mattered more than I expected. Not legally, maybe, not officially, but emotionally, it was the first time she could not meet my eyes. The mediator leaned back. "I think it would be wise," he said slowly, "for all parties to take a break." But Sarah was not finished. "One final point before caucus," she said. She opened the original will copy. The original will contains a forfeiture clause. Any beneficiary who knowingly alters, conceals, destroys, misrepresents, or submits documents inconsistent with Eleanor Brooks's stated estate plan forfeits discretionary benefits. Michael turned to Richard. "You said that clause wouldn't matter." The words slipped out before he could stop them. Everyone heard. Richard's face went still. Emily closed her eyes. I sat frozen. "You said that clause wouldn't matter." "Not what clause? Not. I didn't know. Not. This is the first time I'm hearing this. You said that clause wouldn't matter." Judge Green looked at Michael. "Mr. Brooks," he said, "I suggest you say nothing further until you have independent counsel." Independent counsel. The phrase landed like a gavel. Michael's eyes darted to Richard, but Richard was staring at the table. For the first time since this nightmare began, the people who had cornered me were cornered by their own words. The mediator separated us after that. Back in our small room, I sat down and began shaking. Sarah handed me a bottle of water. "You did well." "I didn't do anything. You stayed." I laughed softly, but tears came with it. "You stayed when staying was hard." Mother's words returned to me in that little mediation room, and for a moment, I felt her hand over mine. 2 hours passed. The mediator moved between rooms. Offers came, then changed. First, they offered money, then more money. Then the house, but no admission. Then the house, and partial trust recognition, but confidentiality. Sarah rejected each version unless the amended document was withdrawn and the original estate plan recognized. Finally, Judge Green returned with a different expression. "Mr. Brooks and Ms. Carter are prepared to agree that the amended will should not be submitted as controlling." My breath stopped. Sarah asked, withdrawn, "Yes. And the original estate plan. They are prepared not to contest its admission subject to formal court approval." I closed my eyes. The fake will was falling. Not with shouting, not with apologies, not with dramatic justice. With paper, dates, silence. One careless sentence. Michael and Emily did not come into our room. They did not apologize. They did not look me in the face. But when we left the mediation center, I saw them at the elevator. Emily had removed Mother's pearl earrings. She held them in her palm, looking down at them as if they had suddenly become too heavy to wear. I walked past her without asking for them, not because I did not care, because I knew now that the pearls were not the victory. The victory was that my mother's real voice had finally been heard louder than their lie. Court approval took another 6 weeks. 6 weeks sounds short when you say it quickly, but when you are waiting for your mother's truth to be officially restored, every day feels like standing in a hallway outside a locked room listening for a key. Sarah handled most of the filings. The amended will was withdrawn as controlling. The original estate plan was submitted with supporting documents from First Buckeye Bank. The hospital records were attached. The audit findings were referenced. Richard Lawson stopped communicating directly and hired his own attorney. Linda Foster resigned from his office before anyone could depose her. That detail told me more than any apology would have. Michael and Emily did not contest the original documents after mediation. Not because they suddenly became honest, but because the evidence had made fighting dangerous. Sarah said their silence was strategic. I said their silence was familiar. They had always preferred silence when truth got too close. When the probate court finally recognized Mother's original estate plan, I sat in Sarah's office and listened as she explained the order. "The house passes to you," she said. "You are confirmed as successor trustee. The false amendment is no longer being treated as valid. The bank will continue to coordinate with us for proper administration of the trust." I looked down at my hands. My fingers were wrinkled now, spotted with age. These were the hands that had changed Mother's sheets, held her medicine cup, pulled weeds from her flower beds, and signed papers I never wanted to sign. Now they were the hands receiving back what others had tried to steal. "What about Michael and Emily?" I asked. Sarah's expression was careful. "The forfeiture clause applies to discretionary benefits. Given the evidence and their agreement not to contest, Michael loses the installment benefit under the trust. Emily loses discretionary access connected to investment assets and future trust distributions. Required personal items can still be handled according to the schedule, but they no longer have leverage." I nodded. I had thought that would make me feel triumphant. It did not. It made me tired. Justice is necessary, but it does not always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it arrives with a signature, a stamped order, and an old woman sitting quietly in a chair, realizing the people she loved had been willing to trade her for property. Sarah studied me. "Are you all right? I don't know yet." That is an honest answer. A week later, I returned to Mother's house as the legal owner. The locks had been changed again, this time by me. The realtor sign Emily had arranged never went up. The consignment sale had been stopped. Some furniture was gone, yes. Some things had been damaged or discarded. The dining room felt strange without all the chairs. The living room mantel looked bare where Emily had taken photographs and ornaments, but the house was still standing, and so was I. Mrs. Whitaker came over with a casserole and tears in her eyes. "I knew Eleanor didn't mean for it to happen that way," she said, hugging me carefully. "Your mother loved you something fierce." I held on to her longer than I meant to. I needed to hear that. She told me once Mrs. Whitaker said, wiping her cheeks, that you were the steady one. I laughed softly. I didn't feel steady. Steady people usually don't. They're too busy holding everything up. That afternoon, I walked room by room with a notebook. Not Mother's hidden notebook. My own. I wrote down what needed repair. Broken cabinet hinge. Missing dining chairs. Guest room boxes. Basement leak. Porch rail loose. Rose bushes overgrown. The house did not need staging. It needed care. I could do care. That was one thing I knew how to do. A few days later, Sarah helped me administer the trust according to Mother's instructions. The charitable gift to her church went first. Then a nursing scholarship donation to Riverside Methodist Hospital, the same hospital where Mother had served most of her career and spent some of her hardest final days. But I wanted to do more. I sat at Mother's kitchen table with Daniel Harper Sarah and a representative from a local community foundation. The afternoon sun came through the curtains, lighting the worn wood where our family had eaten, argued, prayed, laughed, and eventually fractured. I want to establish a scholarship, I said, in Mother's name. Sarah smiled slightly. For nurses. Yes. Students over 45 if possible. Women returning to school after raising families, losing spouses, starting over. Mother always said some of the best nurses were women who had already lived enough life to recognize pain. Daniel looked down, his eyes shining. What would you call it? The foundation representative asked. I looked toward the window where a red cardinal landed on the fence, the Eleanor Brooks Second Chance Nursing Scholarship. The name settled into the room like a blessing. It was not revenge. It was not forgiveness either. It was restoration. I sold a small portion of investment holdings to fund it. Not the house. Never the house. The house would remain, at least for now, a place where truth had survived. News of the scholarship traveled through Mother's church quickly. Women called. Old nurses sent cards. One former co-worker wrote Eleanor would have loved this. She never could stand wasted potential. I pinned that card to the refrigerator. Michael did not call for almost a month. When he finally did, I let it go to voicemail. His message was short. Anthony, it's me. I know things got out of hand. I think we should talk. We're still family. I listened once, then I deleted it. Not because I hated him, because things got out of hand was not an apology. It was a broom trying to sweep a house fire into a dustpan. Emily sent a card. No return address, though I knew her handwriting. Inside, she had written only 2 sentences. I made mistakes. I hope someday you understand I was scared. I sat with that card for a long time. Scared. Maybe she had been. Scared of money problems. Scared of losing status. Scared of not getting what she believed she deserved. Scared people would discover she had built her polished life on a hollow center. But fear did not forge documents by itself. Fear did not redirect bank notices. Fear did not throw away old letters and call them clutter. I placed the card in a drawer, not the trash. That was the most mercy I could offer. Forgiveness, I was learning, did not require reopening the door. Sometimes, forgiveness was simply deciding the poison would not live in your body anymore while still keeping the lock turned. By late spring, the rose bushes began blooming again. I hired a young man from the neighborhood to help repair the porch rail and repaint the trim. I found replacement dining chairs at an estate sale, not the same as Mother's, but close enough to gather around a table again. I brought back the framed anniversary photo Emily had tried to take. Sarah recovered it during the property inventory. When I placed it on the mantel, I touched Daddy's face first, then Mother's. You were right, I whispered. Michael would have sold it before the ink dried. For the first time in months, I laughed without bitterness. The Scholarship Foundation sent me the first application packet in June. A 52-year-old woman from Akron named Denise wanted to become a nurse after caring for her husband through cancer. Her essay began, I thought my life was over when he died, but I have learned that grief can become service. I read that line 3 times. Then I cried at Mother's kitchen table. Not because I was sad, because something broken had become useful. That was the justice I chose. Michael and Emily lost what they tried to steal, but I refused to let their greed become the final chapter of Mother's legacy. They had tried to turn her estate into a battlefield. I turned part of it into a doorway for women who needed a second chance. The audit reversed the papers. The court restored the truth. But what healed me was deciding that my mother's love would not end in a file box. It would move forward. One scholarship, one nurse, one life at a time. The first night I slept in Mother's house again, I did not sleep much at all. I lay in the guest room because I was not ready for her bedroom. The house made old sounds around me. The soft knocking of pipes, the low hum of the refrigerator, the wind pressing against the upstairs windows. For months, those sounds had belonged to fear evidence lawyers and loss. But that night, they slowly became familiar again. Around 3 in the morning, I got up, wrapped Mother's old blue robe around my shoulders, and walked downstairs. The kitchen was silver with moonlight. I made tea the way Mother used to make it for me, too strong with honey. She insisted was better than sugar. Then I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where she had paid bills, folded church programs, peeled apples, and once told me, "Anthony, don't confuse keeping peace with keeping truth." I had not understood how much that sentence would cost me. On the table beside my cup was the last envelope Sarah had recovered from the safe deposit box. It was not a legal document. It was personal. Mother had written across the front for Anthony when the house is quiet. I had waited 3 days to open it. Maybe because I was afraid of crying again. Maybe because I knew it would feel like hearing her voice for the last time. Finally, I slid my finger beneath the flap. Inside was one sheet of stationery and a pressed rose petal faded dark red. My darling Anthony, if you are sitting in my kitchen reading this, then the truth found its way home. I am sorry you had to fight for what should have been honored freely. I know you. You will wonder whether you did too much, whether you hurt people, whether standing firm made you hard. Let me tell you now, truth does not make a woman hard. It makes her whole. I stopped reading and pressed the letter to my chest. For so long I had carried guilt that did not belong to me. Guilt for questioning. Guilt for hiring Sarah. Guilt for not opening the door when Michael came. Guilt for letting Emily's card sit unanswered. But Mother knew that part of me. She knew I would try to make even betrayal comfortable for the people who committed it. I kept reading. Michael has always reached for more when he felt small. Emily learned to polish hunger until it looked like ambition. I loved them, but love is not blindness. I trust you because you know the difference between mercy and surrender. Give what can heal. Protect what must not be stolen. And when the time comes, live in this house with laughter again. Do not let greed be the last sound these walls remember. Tears fell onto the table. Not loud tears. Not desperate ones. Quiet tears. The kind that come when someone you loved leaves you permission to stop hurting yourself for other people's choices. At the bottom, Mother had written, "Plant something yellow by the porch." I always meant to. The next morning, I drove to the garden center and bought yellow daylilies. Mrs. Whitaker saw me kneeling by the porch and came over with a trowel. Eleanor would like those, she said. She asked for them. Mrs. Whitaker smiled through tears. Of course she did. We planted 6 of them along the walkway. My knees complained. My back ached. Dirt got under my nails. And for the first time in months, I felt present in my own life. Not waiting for a call. Not fearing a letter. Not preparing for another lie. Just planting flowers in front of a house that had survived my family's greed. Weeks later, the first recipient of the Eleanor Brooks Second Chance Nursing Scholarship came to visit. Denise from Akron stood in Mother's living room holding a bouquet of daisies, nervous and grateful. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. I looked at her, this woman starting over after loss, and thought of Mother's hands guiding mine. "You already have," I told her. "Just become the nurse you were meant to be." After she left, I stood in the doorway and looked around the living room. The mantel held Mother and Daddy's anniversary photo. The dining table had mismatched chairs now, but it still welcomed people. The recipe box was back in the kitchen. The framed Thanksgiving photograph Richard's fake amendment had left me sat near the window, no longer feeling like a consolation prize. It felt like proof. Michael never truly apologized. Months later, he sent a longer letter, but most of it was about pressure, confusion, and bad advice. Emily moved out of Ohio for a marketing job in North Carolina. I heard from a cousin that she told people the estate dispute had been complicated. That was fine. Some people call accountability complicated because honesty is too plain. I did not chase them. I did not correct every rumor. I did not spend my remaining years trying to make people understand what documents had already proven. I chose peace, but not the old kind. Not the peace that asks a woman to swallow disrespect so dinner can continue. Not the peace that protects liars from consequences. This was a stronger peace, a cleaner one. A peace with locked doors, clear boundaries, and yellow flowers by the porch. One Sunday afternoon, I sat in Mother's garden with a cup of tea and watched a cardinal land on the fence. Its red feathers flashed bright against the green. For one brief second, I wanted to believe it was Mother checking on me, so I did. "I'm all right, Mama," I whispered. And I meant it. My family altered inheritance papers because they thought love made me weak. They thought age made me easy to frighten. They thought grief would keep my head bowed. But they forgot who raised me. Eleanor Brooks raised a daughter who could cry and still keep walking. A daughter who could forgive without surrendering. A daughter who could be wounded without becoming cruel. The audit reversed the papers. The court restored the estate. But my real inheritance was never only the house. It was my mother's courage. And at 68 years old, I finally learned how to live inside it. If this story moved you, I hope you'll share your thoughts in the comments. Tell me whether you believe forgiveness is possible when family betrayal cuts this deep. And if you're watching from somewhere quiet tonight, comment your city and the time where you are. If stories about truth healing and emotional justice speak to your heart, I'd be grateful if you subscribed and stayed with me for the next one. Life has a way of testing us through the people we trusted most. Betrayal from a stranger hurts, but betrayal from family can make you question your own memories, your own worth, and even your place in the world. Anthony's story reminds us that love should never require silence in the face of dishonesty. Keeping peace is not the same as accepting a lie. Forgiveness is not the same as giving someone permission to hurt you again. Sometimes justice does not arrive loudly. Sometimes it comes through one document, one date, one honest witness, one person brave enough to ask, "What really happened?" And sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do is refuse to sign away the truth just because others are uncomfortable with it. The deepest lesson is this: real family honors your dignity. Real love does not erase your contribution. Real healing begins when you stop begging dishonest people to validate what you already know in your heart. If this story touched you, please share your feelings in the comments. Have you ever had to choose truth over family pressure? Comment where you're watching from and what time it is there. And if you believe stories like this can help someone feel less alone, please subscribe and join this community.